Okay, quick, before we get started, I've got a big announcement. I've just launched my new Substack channel at drewtv.substack.com. That's drewtv.substack.com. I've been holding off on doing this for a while because I wanted to make sure that I could give subscribers more bang for their buck than the $8 and change they're going to spend a month. And here we are. With the subscription, you'll get access to paywall-only content, which are going to include private Zoom call live streams with former guests and friends of the show. We'll set those up kind of with like a theme, and then we'll just all get in there and see where it goes. You also get 10% off across the board on everything at all Drew TV websites, which now include jonesplantationfilm.com and the Barnum World Fourth Wall merch site, and more sites coming soon. You'll also have a community of like-minded people you can connect with. Very important. And I'll be periodically dropping bonuses and things for subscribers. Look, I'm never going to be financed by the Hollywood system, nor do I want to be. I made a decision several years ago to not be chained by that system, and I'm trying to build something outside of it. And so if you like what we're doing here, sign up. If you're watching this and you've already signed up, thank you. Okay. This episode was brought to you by Jones Plantation Film. If you haven't seen the indie cult classic Jones Plantation Film yet, go watch that film. It's available now at jonesplantationfilm.com. That's jonesplantationfilm.com and on most major platforms.
Bo Jones!
Lastly, my new film Barnum World is out, and per our Indiegogo campaign promise, it's available for free. So the best place to watch that would be at my Drew TV YouTube channel or my Drew TV Rumble channel.
Barnum statements only work if you can't recognize them. That's important.
Now, time to start this episode of Maverick in the Machine.
Insanity is what I call society. Don't tell me what to do, don't tell me how to be. I don't trust the government, I know they lie to me. They can like my body, yo, for my soul and mind to breathe.
I'm really excited about this episode. I have got another Maverick in the building today. Dr. Ferdinand Santos III. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
You'd consider yourself a
Happy to be here.
polymath?
Polymath, perhaps somewhat, yeah. So I'm trained in physics and PhD in physics and mechanics, also PhD in computer science AI. I say that just to get it out of the way. It's completely unimportant. So just a quick background. I sound American, but I'm not. I have worked in the U.S. and been to university there, along with some other places. But my background is not American, but it's kind of more international. I live now in England, but I've lived in other countries as well. So I've been involved with science and physics, experimentation, teaching, consultancy, building software, building networks, building systems, doing a bunch of stuff in corporations, large and small. And so over time, I've developed some theories about part of my background, which is science and physics. And so I write on Substack about Scientism. So I think that's how you found me, Andrew, through Substack.
Yeah, I listened to your episode on the James Delingpole podcast.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So James found me through Substack. Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting. So James and I have different views of the universe, but that's okay. We had a nice discussion.
Oh, that guy. I mean, there's the saying, eat the red pill, don't eat the bottle. That guy like walked into the pharmacy with a sawed-off shotgun. It was like, give me all your red pills. Then he just sat there and gulped them while the pharmacist pills are falling out of his mouth. He's throwing bottles like that guy. I mean, he thinks Joe Rogan's a tranny. I mean, there's not a that guy's, I like him. He's hilarious.
Oh, he's funny. Yeah, he's very smart. He's Oxford educated. He's very bright.
Yeah.
So he believes in a flat Earth, as you know, which I don't. We discussed that a little bit. And I think there's reasons why the Earth cannot be flat. I think mechanically, physically, it's impossible. But I don't disparage people who believe in that model. They have some proofs that they can offer. So as I said to James, you always have to, if you offer something, like you say, there's a flat plane of water, I don't see a curvature. Well, it's because the degree angle curvature of the Earth, it's only noticeable after 69 or 70 miles. So you're looking down a flat plane of water. How long is that flat plane of water? Where are you? So you won't see the curvature. But you can see a curvature on the ocean. When you look out, you see a ship disappearing hull first. It doesn't disappear, it gets smaller. It disappears hull first. So you know there's a curvature because you're looking beyond the 70-mile range. So anyways, there's things you can discuss with them, but I find that they can be a little fanatical. I do get criticized by flat earthers, which makes me laugh because on the other side, if you criticize science and scientism, you get criticized by everybody else. So you're kind of in the middle, getting.
Yeah, I was gonna say you probably get worse from the scientists than the flat earthers.
Oh yeah, they go. So I know lots of PhDs in physics. I can say that most of them are not very smart because they live in a bubble world, and they really buy into the framework. So in 1962, Thomas Kuhn wrote a book. It's a pretty good book. It's about science and revolutions, and he talks about scientism. And he says paradigms develop that are followed not because they're right, it's because they're enforced and become the new rules. So this is what happens. You get educated in that system, and you become a fanatic. I mean, it is a form of brainwashing. So someone who's been through physics and they think they understand relativity, which is nonsense. I talk about it on my Substack what a bunch of gibberish it is. It all sounds very smart and clever, but it's when you get down to it and actually analyze it, it's nonsense. It leads to a reality. It leads to a virtual reality that cancels out reality. It actually leads to a universe where you and I, Andrew, right now are living in our own universes. That's where relativity leads to. All sorts of nonsense about space-time and time dilation and moving forward in time and backwards in time. Just absolute rubbish if you look at it scientifically and physically. But if you're indoctrinated in that, you have a PhD and you spent 10 years, 20 years studying it, you're a fanatic. I mean, you can't even talk to somebody like that usually about the demerits or the weaknesses of the theory. They just respond with anger and a lot of aggressiveness. So if you say, for instance, the Big Bang is nonsense and false, which it is, I can go through 100 reasons why the Big Bang is wrong. People don't even listen. As soon as you start with that, I think the Big Bang's wrong. Okay, they tune out. And they come back at you with consensus, the science says, the teacher says, AI says, the textbook says, the equations say, whatever. So they come back with all the counter arguments, which are basically premised on authority or consensus or what everyone believes. But that's not science. That has nothing to do with science. So science is mechanical and physical experimentation and observation. And with Delingpole, I mentioned George Stephenson. So we've gone from the world of George Stephenson, who invented the rocket, which is the locomotive. He actually invented also the rails, so steel, first iron, but then steel rails. So at the time of 1825, when he created the first prototype locomotive at Rainhill near Liverpool, there was about a 2-ton machine, and it just broke the wooden rails. So we had to come up with how do I build rails to support my locomotive? So here's a guy born in poverty, uneducated, illiterate. He's at the coalface at the age of 12, working in the coal mines. He goes on from that and tinkers and becomes an engineer, self-taught, and creates a locomotive plus the system, the rail system we know today. And the gauge, the 4-foot 8-inch gauge, is from Stephenson. I don't know why 4-foot 8 inches. Nobody knows why, but that's what he chose. So that's him. Now compare him to a guy talking about abstract maths and models like Einstein or any of these other worthies in physics, coming up with theories that have absolutely no basis in mechanics or physics or experimentation. There's a world of difference here. So we've gone from let's build something using our common sense to I need to have 5 or 6 ology degrees, and I have to have a PhD in boilerology and PhD in railwayology and PhD in locomotiveology before I can become George Stephenson. Now that's where we are. Imagine George Stephenson today. People say, who are you? Where's your PhD, George, in locomotion? Come on, George. You don't have a PhD in boilers. You don't know anything about steam, George. There'd be no railways today. But we defer to people, the scientism, which is basically, I define it as, it's a scientocracy of control, where they say science knows best. Science is the overarching philosophy of life. Everything has to be related to science. You saw this during the corona pandemic, where they always said, follow the fake science. I mean, who the hell believes that a dead RNA particle emanated from the anus of a bat in China onto a pangolin and then went to a non-existent wet market in Wuhan and then sneezed around the world? Who actually would believe that? That's what they want to push on you. And the science says, the PhD studies say, there's just no common sense to it. We've exited the world of common sense into the world of abstract models, maths, and layers of obfuscation, which I talk about in my Substack. So all the worthies that we're told to memorize in school by the state education system, the Einsteins, the Newtons, the speed of light, all the stuff, Andrew, is wrong. You're going to go down and analyze it. It's simply wrong. But if you talk to anyone who's educated in physics or science or maths or even has a PhD in business or something, they go ballistic, they go berserk. You can't possibly challenge the paradigm. So this is why a lot of people go underground. So I talked to Delingpole about the moon landings and the fraud. We started off with Gagarin and the Soviet fraud, which just makes me laugh. So the Soviet Gagarin gag, as I call it, was a classic. But that sets the stage for the Apollo film sets and the Apollo cinematics that they conjure up 8 years later.
Well, hold on.
So,
We're going to get into all that. We're going to get into
Yeah.
all that. I want to go down that rabbit hole. Before we
Okay.
do, I want to pause for this.
Go
So
ahead.
first of all, before we go, where can people find you? I'll have the links in the show notes, and obviously we'll go over it again before you leave. But let's just get that
No
out there. I
problem.
like to get that done at
So-
the beginning.
So Substack, and then it's unstabinated, UNSTABBINATED, unstabinated on Substack, meaning that I'm not stabbed. I wasn't stabbed with the
Okay.
Rona poisons. I write about Corona on my Substack. I write about viruses as well, and
Yeah,
and that
it's
whole
a great Substack.
mafia. Mafia industry. But I focus on scientism, so it's really what Thomas Kuhn was talking about,
Well,
1962.
when you talk about credentialing, basically, which is a control system, I'm not saying that everybody
Yes.
obviously that's credentialed isn't qualified, but that system it works because there's so many people, as we saw, like you talked about during the Corona horse shit, they have no integrity, and that's throughout humanity. So for some reason, people assume because people are credentialed with these high credentials that somehow they have more integrity, when in fact it's probably even harder for them, because with that credential they get money, they get a golf membership, the golf club membership, you go to the conferences and everything like that.
Oh, yeah.
So what is it about you? Because one of the things about the show is Maverick and the Machine. Why are certain people, they maintain their integrity and still succeed in life? What was there anything in your childhood or upbringing or anything that led you to this? So far, there's really been no through line. It just seems like it's genetic. That's what I've come to the conclusion so far.
I think it might be. It's interesting. Yeah. So, like, my worldview philosophically in my readings, my background is I call myself like a Churchillian conservative. So I'm a very much small government. I'm a Reagan in terms of trust and verify. So I don't trust authority. I never have. And
Mhm.
it comes, I think, from your background as a child, how you're brought up, what your parents teach you. I'm also a Catholic. So most Catholics, you're told to obey the Pope. I certainly don't. I think Pope Leo's an idiot. I think his predecessor, Frank, was even worse. So I have a very deep suspicion of authority, because authority and power corrupts. And so I noticed at my school when I grew up that the teachers didn't know what they're talking about. But I saw this at a very young age, that
Mhm.
if they're teaching science, I just asked basic questions. They couldn't answer them. So I was taught evolution in high school. Like, I asked all sorts of questions about evolution, and the teachers just couldn't simply answer me. They couldn't even explain to me what DNA is, or how DNA is formed, or how that would form in nature. So how would a multi-cell organism form in a lab by itself? This was a question I had. They couldn't answer me. So I started to be very suspicious that they're teachers teaching state dogma. They're teaching from the state textbook. But what if the textbook's wrong? So that was always my premise. What if the thing I'm looking at, I'm being told to memorize, is wrong? Then you go to university, and the frameworks I learned at university are wrong. They were wrong. They were wrong 30 years ago, and they're still teaching them today. It's just so, but it's a system where the change, like Thomas Kuhn said, is so slow, and other people have talked about it. Not just Kuhn, but other philosophers of science have said that generations almost have to die off, and a new generation has to come with fresh ideas to get rid of the old stuff. And I think that's true. But I think it goes back to, so scientism as a philosophy is really statism. So science is married to the state. You saw this in Corona.
Mhm.
If you disagree with the science, you're declared an enemy of the state. You're disagreeing with state doctrine. In the UK, they're saying if you are not participating, not getting a jab, not wearing a diaper, you are an enemy of the state. You are putting granny at risk. Meanwhile, they've murdered 50,000 grannies behind closed doors during the lockdowns, which no one seems to care about. They did the same thing in New York State with Cuomo. So it's science is now married to the state. NASA, which is a part of the CIA complex, part of the military, is now space science. It makes your head spin, doesn't it? So if you criticize NASA, you're criticizing science, but you're also criticizing the US government. And Trump last year classified NASA as a spy organization. Well, thanks, Donald. It's always been a spy organization since 1958. Thanks for clarifying that for us. But what's going on is that there's a movement. If you criticize standard model science, whether it's the quack zines, whether it's global warming. We see it in the UK. You can get in trouble in the UK for questioning global warming. Transgendered fascism. What else is it? It's the only thing I can think of calling it. Gender fascism. If I criticize gays and queers and trannies, you can actually go to jail in some countries. So this is where we are, because they say, well, the science is settled on that. No, it's not. There's no science supporting any of it. But they say they've taken science, the governments and states, and merged it into their governing model. And this is very dangerous. So in the corona medical Nazism, which is what it was, they always referred to science, as if Fauci has a clue what science means. He's been a fraud since the HIV episode, which they concocted to save the CDC and Fauci's empire, the NIH. The 80s, they're talking about defunding the CDC. And people don't know this. The Congress was debating cutting funding for these guys. So what do? Out comes the HIV from a simian. And they come up with some story, and they target the gay population, feed them drugs, and say, see, they're sick. It's an epidemic. Or, yeah, you're poisoning them with AZT. So it's the same playbook. We had people dying in the UK after being poisoned from the stabs in Corona. Oh, no, they died from Rona, was a narrative. No, they died from being stabbed. Died from being locked down, having absolutely no human contact, etc., no vitamins, no sunshine, nothing. So the whole narrative around scientism, I think, leads to something about scientocracy, or the control by government of your life in the name of course, the science. And that's where we're heading. I don't know how you feel about that, Andrew, but that's what I think.
No, I'm with you 100%. I don't even.
Yeah.
Why is knowing the moon landing so, like, you're a scientist and somebody who digs down deep into these subjects. That's why I want to have you on. I'm more of like a systems. I can look at something, archetype. I'm really good at archetypes. I'm good at picking people like you that I know have integrity, that I can listen to, that do this research. But I can look at the moon landing footage and know that it's complete horseshit. I can know that they lie about everything, and that, they're not going to tell me the truth about this. It's just like the Earth thing. I want to get back to that real quick. Is that I had the Flat Earth Dave guy on several months ago. My thing is, I don't think it's flat either, but I don't think they're telling us the truth about the construct of the universe. Right?
You're right. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. No, I talk about my Substack too. So I'll just give you one example, right? So the structure of our solar system. So I'll tell you that Newton, I have a post coming out Saturday on Newton, because I really get sick and tired of people telling me that I built a bridge using Newton. No, you didn't. You built a bridge using other laws from Hooke and from Young, and use software that has point-to-point stress calculations. You don't use Newton. You don't use gravity. You don't use force equals ma, which is a nonsense equation to start with. So I get sick and tired of the Newton stuff. But if you look at Newton tried to understand the structure of the universe, came up with this idea of gravity, but it's based on Kepler's maths. Kepler's maths are also wrong. And so Kepler, if you get this, I mean, here's where we are. You're taught in school that Kepler's third law is iconic, and it can never be discounted. It has to be accepted. But it's wrong, because if you look at just his calculations, Kepler, he works with a guy Brahe, Tycho Brahe. He kills Brahe, gets Brahe's data, and Kepler is trying to prove the Copernican theory. He can't get the orbits to line up with the observations from Tycho Brahe. So he comes up with the idea of an ellipse. He thinks to himself, I get things to work in an ellipse. I can construct a solar system where there's an elliptical pattern around the sun. But he comes up with 13 million miles for the sun's distance from the Earth. That's number one, that's what he comes up with. But his other mass for the other planets don't work. So he keeps playing around with the mass, and then comes up with 52 million miles Earth distance to sun. Then everything fits together. All the other planets, all the other orbits kind of make sense. But you ask Kepler, did you actually figure out mechanically that is 52 million miles away? No, it's on the mass. So how do I know it's 52 million? What if he's wrong? What if it's 5 million? Tycho said it was 5. All the ancient astronomers, Ptolemy or Aristarchus, said it was 2 to 5. They used Euclid's mass. Now, here's the thing. I use Euclid's mass. I can calculate the moon distance to be 238,000 miles away using Euclid's mass. So I believe the moon is that distance away. I can mechanically prove it. I can use parallax and a whole bunch of other stuff. It all makes sense to me, yes? If I apply the same mass to the sun, I get 9 million miles. So let's say the sun's 10 million miles away. That changes everything. The entire solar system math might be wrong, Andrew. We could be stationary. I'm not saying the Earth is stationary. I'm saying we could be in a tectonic universe where we're stationary. And I write my Substack about things like fluid dynamics, celestial mechanics, how it could work. It is entirely possible that we don't move and the solar system does, including the sun, move around us. It's possible. I'm not saying it's right. It's a good theory and it fits the observed facts. So you can't discount it. So, but you never hear a discussion on it. Now, somehow they've taken Kepler's 52 million miles distance from the sun to the Earth and now made it 93 million miles. And there's reasons for that because the observations, again, didn't quite fit the 52 million mile distance. So they changed it to 93 based on mass. And then in 2012, they codified it. So in 2012, the International Astronomy Union got together, just a bunch of guys in a room, and said, that is the official distance. We call it 1 AU, 1 astronomical unit, and that is it. We're done. And that's the law. So you can't even argue against it now. If you go to anyone and say, I don't believe the 1 AU stuff, you won't get published, you won't get a degree, you won't be invited to conferences, nothing, right? It's over.
You're going to get the money.
Yeah, money and power, and nobody even understands what they're talking about. How did you arrive at this 93 million miles? If you go through the math, and I go through my Substack, it's all nonsense. There's assumption after assumption after assumption. So what if one of those assumptions are wrong, guys? Not even considered. And then every observation is back mapped or retrofitted to fit into the theory. So even if you find something that says, okay, I just contradicted your 93 million miles, they'll say, no, we can explain that. Hold on. That anomaly is explained by, and they'll pop out another equation for you, and another equation, and layer upon layer, and you're completely lost after a while. This is what they do. And so this is why non-experts, so-called, and non-technical people become very frustrated by it. They might be interested in the topic, but you get completely bulldozed over with the maths and models. This is their game. But go ahead. Yeah, you want to say something?
No, I'm listening. Okay. I'm all listening. I was you keep going. I'm all ears.
Okay, so that relates back. So I that's a good comment about our universe. I think I read in my Substack. Universe is smaller. The universe is James Webb Space Telescope. Okay, it's out way past the moon. Okay, it's massive. It's taking measurements. It's got millions and millions of data points. Okay, I've gone through the data. Other people have gone through the data. It's a flat universe. It's a flat disk. That's what it's saying. Now, they can spin it any way they want, and they always do. James Webb Space Telescope, the Hubble telescope is telling us, Hubble telescope is about 300 miles up, is telling us very clearly, flat universe, flat disk, much smaller than we are told. And I write in my Substack, and you can read books by Halton Arp. The quasar phenomenon disproves the Big Bang and the massive universe and acceleration of the universe. Just it disproves it. Quasars. Dig into quasars if you really want to understand the structure of the universe, why it's much smaller. Quasars are the key, and nobody even knows really what they are. But they're lined up and they're aligned perfectly with the Earth. And so this has been known since the 70s, but you never hear about it. It's never discussed. It's never given in educations or in university or in courses. They never discuss quasars because quasars disprove a lot of the cosmological model and the standard model. So quasars are a key, but there's so much data out there that tells us that the universal model of endless expansion, of this Hubble constant, of the expanding universe is completely wrong. Hubble's constant is now almost at zero. So Hubble had this constant he applied to galaxies moving at a certain rate, the universe moving at a certain rate, based on a fraud called the redshift. Redshift is just a light frequency, light spectrum issue. It has nothing to do with distance. We have blue shifting phenomena. We have galaxies heading towards our solar system, for example, our galaxy as well. So that's a blue shift. It's coming towards us. So how does that prove redshifting, which is everything shifting away from us? It doesn't. So there's all sorts of anomalies that they can't explain. But if you look at the data, what you just mentioned, the structure of the universe is not what we were told, and that's entirely correct. And people like Bellingpool, who are flat earthers, they go back to the Bible. So on page 1 or 2 of my Bible, I have his architecture with the dome and the stars inside the dome, and outside the dome's water. People say, well, that's really stupid. Why is there water outside of a dome? It's not stupid, because if space isn't either. It's not a vacuum. It's not a vacuum. A vacuum is nothing. It means you wouldn't exist. Light cannot travel in a vacuum. A vacuum is nothingness. A light travels in a medium. You need to have a medium or atmosphere to transfer photons. Photons have mass. Einstein said photons that have mass. They have mass. So Einstein, again, was wrong. That's why E equals mc squared is wrong for many reasons. So that equation is also junk science. But photons have mass, and mass moves through something. Now, the mass might be quite small, incredibly small. If you weigh it in Newton's weight, 10 to the minus whatever, it's very small, but it's there. So medium of exchange, whether it's money or whether it's our atmosphere or whether it's space, exists. And so you need to have that medium. That used to be called the ether, Andrew. And as you know, they got rid of it. So Newton got rid of it because he had to have his equations balanced. All Newton did was he took Aristotle's equation. Aristotle invented force equals mass times acceleration, not Newton. Aristotle added in the ether because Aristotle was more intelligent than Newton. He knew the ether existed in space. Now, back to page 2 or 1 of my Bible. What is the water above the dome? Fluid dynamics. What is that? It's the ether. So Dellingpole's not wrong. When Dellingpole says there's water above the dome, he is right. Because in the ether of space, it would act like fluid dynamics. Fluid dynamics is another topic. I write about it in my Substack, but there is every indication that fluid dynamics applies to space. So the Bible is not wrong in that. In fact, it's incredibly prescient. It's been proven. So if fluid dynamics exists in space, and the ether exists in space, almost everything else they've told us about the speed of light and how space operates is wrong. Absolutely wrong, because light cannot be invariant or the same speed at all times and all frames of reference in an ether. It will vary considerably. The speed of light on this planet at 1G surface has nothing to do with the speed of light in space. So imagine that. This would blow your mind. If we're saying that the speed of light in space, and Newton said this as well, Aristotle said this, if it's infinite or nearly infinite, the age of the universe is wrong, the age of this planet is wrong, long ages are wrong, endless time is wrong, endless expansion is wrong, everything in the cosmological model is wrong. If the speed of light is variant, everything we've been taught, Andrew, is wrong. And the smartest woman, smartest IQ ever in history, was an American, Marilyn DeVos savant. You know, you've heard the word savant. That person's a savant, a genius, right? Comes from her. She had an IQ of 212 or something. She's from Indiana. She was asked in the 80s, what great discovery would completely overturn the world? She said, the speed of light is wrong. Now, this person has a bigger brain than I'll ever have. She said the speed of light's wrong. And she said, the second thing I'll tell you, if there's a creator. Now, if there's a creator God, which I believe in as a Christian, okay, the heads of every single PhD in science explodes because they're all atheists. And but design needs a creator. So we can't explain the design of this universe. Newton said he had fictitious forces to his equations. So it's equivalent of you and me trying to do a math test and saying, oh, I can't get this damn thing to balance. I'll add a fictitious force here. Teacher, fictitious force, I got the balance, yay. That's what they do. He didn't know what it was. His gravity doesn't explain the structure of this universe because it's a weak force. Gravity doesn't explain the structure of the cosmos because as you move out from planet Earth, the gravity, of course, is lessened. It decreases, and it decreases quite quickly. This is why they have the ISS supposedly at 250 miles up. But even there's a gravity pull. Even there, 250 miles up, they have to reboost the ISS. The Soyuz Russian spacecraft boosts it all the time to keep it in orbit. Otherwise, it crashes. Now, the moon landing, it does make you laugh. We're talking about Apollo. So these guys, just a quick kind of segue into Apollo.
Okay.
So people don't understand that there's actually 3 modules involved with Apollo 11. Now, this week I published a fairly long monograph in the Substack about the communications fraud. So one thing I do know very well, and I have no patience in the fanboys and the NASA boys arguing me about it, is communications and tech. Don't even get involved on that because a networking bandwidth, communications, that's, as Americans will say, that's my wheelhouse. So don't even get in there because I'm gonna hit you out of Fenway Park into the Atlantic Ocean. That's what I'm gonna do.
I remember you talking about this on Dellingpole. Yeah, go into this. This is good. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So this people don't understand the structure of what they're trying to sell us. So if you go into what they're trying to say they did, so if you go to the 1960s, okay, before 1961, so a quick background to all this. The 1960s is really the age of cinema for space. And they set the stage for a lot of the fraud we see with the ISS and Skylab. Skylab was also a joke. Skylab, the ISS, and even some of the monkey business with SpaceX and the Blue Origin fraud from last April. So it turned to cinema. So they turned to a lot of cinema. So and famously, Kennedy in 61 said we'll be on the moon by the end of the decade. So what does that mean in reality? Okay, so what the Soviets did in 61, April, was they had a fraud with a guy called Gagarin. He was a fat-faced Soviet peasant. He was untrained pilot. He had maybe, I don't know how many hours. I give him maybe 200 hours in a plane. Okay, be like me and you going to a local airfield, getting trained up as a pilot of a small craft, maybe jumping into a jet a couple of times with a trainer, and then suddenly we're going off in the Vostok 1 spacecraft 200 miles in orbit, circumnavigating the Earth. That's really what they're trying to sell you. So the Soviets did the fraud, and they taught the Americans how to do the fraud. This is April 61. Before April 61, both sides, Soviets and American NASA, had all sorts of problems. Failed liftoffs, failed rocket launches, failed everything. It was a cartoon. Suddenly, in spring of 61, it all changes. Magically changes. New technology, new rockets, new this, new that. First time it's tried, it works. Common theme with NASA, common theme with all space endeavors. First time it's tried, it all works. It's not the way of the world in reality, okay? First time you try something and testing in an environment, if it's complex, it usually fails. It fails pretty badly. This is why you have testing, pre-prod, pre-live, and live. That's why you have different environments, different testing, etc. So 61, April, Gagarin goes up, and I talked to Delingpole about this in some detail. There's no possibility of radar tracking it because radar doesn't work at that altitude, doesn't work beyond 90, 100 miles terrestrially in 61. You can't skin track something like that. You'd have to have a transponder signal sent down, which was never sent down from the Vostok. What the Russians did was have a radio satellite beam from near Moscow into the LEO, low Earth orbit. That could have been picked up by NASA or somebody scanning. So you have signal scanning. You don't know what the signal is. You don't know where it comes from. You have no idea what's inside the signal. So when people say it was tracked, simply a lie. It wasn't skin tracked. You have a signal being tracked, and the signal could be from anywhere. So the Americans took note of this and used it to their great advantage in 69. We'll get to that in a second. So Gagarin does some complicated circumnavigation of the globe. It's a fraud. He lands right beside where he parachute trained. Absurd. There's no evidence whatsoever of his landing, parachuting, nothing. There's no photo evidence, no video. So the Soviets made claims based on 10 minutes of communications in the middle of the flight, supposedly. Those communications don't comport with or align with the actual flight plan. So Gagarin says, I saw America. He didn't go anywhere near America. He's flying over the Pacific. So stuff like this. So we know it's a fraud. The technology wouldn't have worked. I go through that in my Substack in some detail. Very complicated, by the way. Putting someone in a capsule against a rocket and launching them. There's all sorts of maneuvers you have to do through almost every minute of the journey to get out of the atmosphere, including flipping the capsule around and going out heat shield first and flipping it back around again to come back through the atmosphere heat shield first, or you'll die. And the heat shields, I see no evidence that Gagarin even had a heat shield on his capsule. The heat shield ought to be massive because they're dealing with friction at temperatures of 5,000 Fahrenheit. 5,000 Fahrenheit melts everything. I don't care what the fanboys say. It melts everything, including steel. So if you don't have a huge heat shield on the bottom and you're not perfectly aligned, coming down at a perfect angle, you're going to die. So you have to be the most skilled pilot imaginable. He wasn't. So we know that, and there's lots of other reasons, but we know it's a fraud. So, but the Americans.
One second though, could you say something about the technology that ship too? Wasn't the ship like manual technology, or what was going on with that?
Oh, it's all analog stuff. So yeah. So this is also the problem with Apollo 11. It's all analog. It's all vacuum tube technology.
Right.
So there's no real time comms, right? So this is the problem. So in my Substack, I posted about the Apollo 11 communications. So real time communications don't exist. And so so we'll get to that in just a second. That's a great point. Okay, the comms don't exist. The networking doesn't exist for this. There's no real-time comms. There's no real-time data processing. There's no real-time tracking. So you have fanboys saying, well, it's tracked. Well, tracked with what? They'll say, well, the radar tracked it. Well, radar doesn't go up 200 miles in altitude, guys. So and you can't skin track. And if you're going to skin track, you're terrestrially limited anyways to 90 up 200 miles out terrestrially if you look at the land. So that see it in World War II, you see it after World War II. This is why you have radar stations everywhere. There's handoffs, and the handoffs are always, they are manual handoffs. There's no data comms, there's no real-time networking of data, there's no data processing in real time, there's no global coverage of anything in 1961. So it's just silly. It's a silly argument. he wasn't tracked. And you could fake. So I'll get to in a second how NASA faked the signal for Apollo. It's really good. And it's from their own documentation. So I'm not making any of this up. This is from NASA's own documentation. All I did was go through the documentation, parse it, go through it, understand it, and I just repeat it back to them. This is the way I argue with the scientism or the science. I take what you give, analyze it, I'll put it back to you and say, that's absurd. Well, that's what you told me. I'm just using your data. I'm giving it back to you. This is what you said. It's wrong. It's unscientific. Now what? So if you go to April 61, we have the Soviet fraud. Americans are caught, right? They're behind. Big angst in the United States. It was a big thing. It was a Cold War. It's us versus them, red or dead, all that stuff. So in May, Shepard goes up. Shepard goes up 75 to 115 miles. It depends on who you talk to. It depends on the year with NASA, but somewhere between 75 miles in altitude, 115, goes up. It's a parabolic bell shape, goes up and down, lands Cape Canaveral, northeast, Bahamas, down in the ocean, away from prying eyes. Very little proof of anything to do with either entering the capsule. He does land with the capsule, but you have no idea where it's dropped from or where it came from. Very careful, very careful. 15-minute flight. Easy enough to do a Capricorn 1. There's a 4-hour countdown for some reason. No idea why there's 4 hours, but that's what they do. So lots of time to get them out of there, and you can fly to the Bahamas and drop down in the capsule from a C grade military plane. So that's not a problem. So that could be done. But before Shepard, it's all pain and agony for NASA. Like nothing's working. But Shepard goes up, everything works fine. First manned flight for the U.S. New technology, new rocket, new communications, new telemetry, everything works fine. He's up and down, and the Americans are happy. They're back in the game. But game on with the Soviets. We're back in the game, boys. Let's go. So a few months later in July, Grissom goes up. Same exact flight as Shepard. Grissom comes down. There's a problem with the hatch. Hatch opens. Grissom almost drowns. The 2 helicopters there. One helicopter ignores Grissom. It goes for the capsule. Second helicopter belatedly gets Grissom. So in 1999, they pulled out Grissom's capsule from near Bahamas, and there's no heat shield on it. So all sorts of reasons why there's no heat shield. So the hatch door wouldn't open, the heat shield fell off, et cetera, et cetera. So all sorts of excuses. Maybe he never had a heat shield. But Grissom, I think he's murdered in 67, okay? And he's in the Apollo. He's supposed to go to the moon, be the first astronaut. But he's in 61, he starts talking. So Grissom in 61 is complaining. So this is the Mercury program, the 1-seater. Okay, after that's the Gemini program, the 2-seater, and after that's the Apollo program, the 3. He's complaining about the 1-seater technology in 61. So he sent a message in 61, like, shut your face, or we're going to drown you. We'll get rid of you. He was a mechanic. Grissom was almost like an engineer. He had to know everything about the capsule, how it worked. He wanted to know all the electronics, everything to do with communications, he wanted to know everything. He was like a George Stephenson. He was that interested in the technology. So he started talking in 61. He was given a warning in 61. He was murdered in 67 when he famously put a lemon outside the capsule of Apollo and said, we're going nowhere. I can't even talk to communications base 5 miles away. This is in January 67. A short while later, a couple of years later, supposedly 2.5 years later, Armstrong's walking on the moon. Impossible in reality. So there's a pattern here of deceit. Now, it's unclear. I don't think either Grissom or Shepard went up. I think they did a Capricorn 1. I think they imitated the Soviets. They controlled everything very well. Short flight, 15 minutes, easy enough to fake. Glenn, they have a chimp go up before Glenn. So the chimp goes up in November 61. Circumnavigates the globe twice. Enos the chimp, very famous guy, I talked about him on my Substack. A chimp would die. The G-force alone would kill you. You're dealing with, like, we sit in our chairs at 1G. These guys are going 5, 6, 7G. 17,500 miles an hour. You have to control everything. You have to pilot the craft. You have to have perfect angling. You have to have understanding of rockets and retro rockets and stabilize the craft. It's very difficult. That's why Glenn and these guys have 5,000, 10,000 hours of training in jets. And they're the pro of the pros, they're Top Guns. So Glenn goes up, does a circumnavigation, takes his famous perfect photo of the Earth that everyone has seen. And Americans are just as good as the Soviets at the stage. And Kennedy makes an announcement after Shepard goes up in 61 saying we're going to land on the moon by 69. So NASA, with Shepard and Grissom, and this is a key thing to keep in mind, NASA cannot have any failures. So imagine if Shepard actually went up and it was real and he died. which if you do mathematical probability, and something I've done on my Substack as well, the very, very low chance of Shepard, first time, new technology, new craft, new rocket, and all this stuff, that it works. You can just do mathematical probability. It's less than 10%. So he's probably going to die. Now, if that ever happened, if Grissom or Shepard had died, NASA's cut off. I mean, they're done. The Congress would have cut their funding. And part of this space race, so-called space co-opetition in some ways, is about money. It's about money laundering. It's about establishing a massive flow of funds that are siphoned off by all sorts of people, agencies, senators, politicians, journals, universities, whoever in the supply chain. And they feed off of this. So once it starts, you don't want it to stop. And so they had to have Kennedy was told in 1961, we have guaranteed success. Now, you don't tell the president of the United States that unless you have a Capricorn 1 up your sleeve. You're doing the Capricorn 1. Kennedy, he will not die. Shepard can't die 100%. There's nothing 100% guaranteed when you put a guy in a tin can and fire him up at 17,500 miles an hour into 100 miles in orbit. The chances of death are pretty high in 61. Again, back to analog technology, comms, telemetry, life support systems, the heat shield, untested, never before done with someone inside a capsule. Not that this is all new. So imagine doing something as dangerous as that and saying 100% guarantee. So you know that they were up to something. So they learned from the Soviets with Gagarin. And I think it goes back before Gagarin. I think the Soviets found out Capricorn 1 is going to happen in April or May. We got to do it now, guys, with Gagarin. We got to be the first ones. And the impact on the Soviet population of Gagarin's success is still evident today. It's hard for you and me to understand, Andrew, how important it was. It was like a miracle. It was like Christ appearing and spreading out his arms and saying, I bless you all. You are my children. And everyone getting divine light and energy. It was like that event. It was transformative. And if you talk to them today, Russians, they still believe in Gagarin. They have a messianic faith in it. It's like Christ himself orbited the Earth. It had such a confidence-boosting transformation of that society. And you can read about it. You can read the newspapers. You can see some of the old TV feeds. People crying. People in the streets hugging each other. It's unbelievable, but that's what went on in 61. So people say, well, why would they fake it? They faked it for patriotism, national prestige, or Soviet prestige, et cetera, et cetera. Why would NASA fake it, people ask? Money, power, to win the technology race, to declare by 1969 that you are prima inter pares as a country, you are number one. You're the only country in history that has the technology and the intelligence to go to the moon. We're number one in everything, guys. Technology, comms, soft, everything. We're number one, and we now start to have the New World Order. The New World Order starts being talked about in the 70s and 80s. It's American technology that drives that international relations power, along with the U.S. military. It all fits in together. Why do they do it? NASA is part of the U.S. military. NASA is part of the CIA. NASA is part of that complex that has the New World Order as a goal. And the alignment of international relations to those goals. That's what it's all about. Whether it's real or not, it's immaterial to these people. The CIA wouldn't care if they actually went to the moon or not. I don't think they care. They care about the outcome. What's the result of people believing that we went there? That's what they're really interested in. So money laundering starts with
it's basically
Shepard's
an intelligence cutout, right? I mean, it's basically intelligence,
Absolutely.
money laundering cutout. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry to cut you off. Yeah.
No, well, fine. It's a good point. And it starts with Shepard. So the Shepard flight restores confidence. You can see it in the American newspapers. You can see it in American TV. People are happy. I mean, the average person saying, oh, we're back in the game. We're not we're those red devils. They're not as good as we thought they were. We're just as good as they are. Our technology, our society, our system, capitalism. Always makes me laugh when people talk about capitalism. Yeah. What state capitalism are you referring to? Is it the gray Marxist version or the not so gray Marxist version? So it also was important for the American society, and it's propagated to the newspapers. So the CIA in the 60s has Operation Mockingbird, propaganda, controlling the media, controlling the press, direct payments in some cases, coercion in other cases. But they also have Operation Corona, most people don't know that the Corona scamdemic is named after a U.S. military operation in the 60s. So that was a spy operation. It was a spy and espionage operation on the U.S. population and other countries as well, controlling the narrative. Most people don't understand that. They do laugh at you. They do laugh at the world. These people.
Yeah.
They have a good. So in the UK, as Dalrymple said, it's true. The first man to be jabbed with the holy elixir was a guy called William Shakespeare.
I couldn't believe that when I heard that. That is the funniest thing.
It's a classic, but he's right.
Yeah.
And they're doing these, I don't know, Freemason signs, wherever they are. And they do it at the Olympics too. I noticed they're doing this love thing, but it's a Freemason sign or something. They're doing this love. The first woman that got jabbed in the UK just before William Shakespeare was doing that in a wheelchair. She was doing that sign. And and William Shakespeare did the same sign. So it's a signal of something. But they do laugh at us. Yeah, it's something Freemason signal. It's some Illuminati, whatever it is. I have no idea what it means, but it means that the game is on, I guess, or everything's going okay, and they're playing along. So these symbols are important, and NASA, from the time of Shepard, it now becomes so the money starts to flow and it's endless. So they spent $250 billion US on the Apollo program, which is a lot of cash. But since then, they spent another trillion and a half on NASA. So it's a lot of money going into space races and space games. So the ISS itself has consumed over $300 billion US, and most of it's from NASA. So most Americans don't know that. You're funding $300 billion to play around in a couple of tubes, maybe 200 miles up in altitude. Who knows where it is? With all the fraud that you have, all the zero-G gravity planes and the snorkels and the water bubbles and the spacewalks and all the other stuff that we can see that are frauds. So it's quite a complex of money interests. And so the Apollo program could not fail. So we go back to the Shepard. Shepard cannot fail. Kennedy said 69, we got to be on the moon. So the massive military industrial spy complex kicks in. And what most people don't know, they don't teach at schools or university, is that by 1965, the CIA and NASA have built the world's largest, most unbelievably sophisticated engineering simulation center for anything to do with space at Langley, Virginia. So that probably gives you a clue that NASA is part of the CIA. So this simulation complex for NASA is at Langley, just down the road, a place called Hollow, I think it is. But it's at Langley. Interesting, isn't it? You never hear about it. It was massive. They had replicas of the moon's surface, hand-painted, and it looked exactly as they would observe and thought the moon looked like in terms of the surface, where they're going to land. And then above that, they had the world's biggest gantry crane. So if you've ever looked at the videos or photos, you're wondering, guys, where's the flames or where's the emissions or exhaust or something from the capsules? There isn't any because they're just moving up and down the crane. And that's why the videos or feeds are so short, the 30, 40 seconds. So that's what they're doing. They're lifting the 5-ton command module or the 15-ton, supposedly 15-ton lunar module, 10 tons of fuel, 5 tons of metal and alloys up and down. So that's what they're doing. That's why you don't see any flames in the landings. So that's the easiest and simplest explanation. So Langley had simulators. They could simulate everything from the command module, anything to do with the command module, up to the landing, including the approach to the moon. They had simulators. They had a rail system. They had orbs of the moon. So everything was very sophisticated. And of course, they'll tell you it's training, but it wasn't training because by 1965, this center was built. And by 65 as well, they built along with that the NASA Communications Network. So I think by 64, 63, well, it takes 5 years to build this, right? So my estimation is that if you look at Langley, it takes about 4 or 5 years to build it. So they started the plans in 60, 61 because they knew they weren't going anywhere. So as I mentioned, Delingpole, a lot of Russian, Soviet cosmonauts rather, they were incinerated and they were picked up, the frequencies were picked up on ham radio operators in Europe. So in the 50s and 60s, you hear people in Russian saying, I'm dying, I'm burning up, it's too hot, and they're gone. So people are being flung up into the atmosphere as test guinea pigs. And I think NASA knew by early 60s they were going nowhere. So
like the Russians were doing this when the Russians were doing this in like the 50s and trying to get people up there. What was going on?
Oh yeah, they're flinging up dogs, cats, monkeys.
And they're just all getting incinerated.
they're all the number of dead is unknown, but the official dead count is sad enough. So before Gagarin, everyone's dead. Everyone dies. After Gagarin, a few more are dead. They die with better technology, supposedly. So I mean, the pattern's pretty clear that
What is the
you're not
official
going
death
above.
count? Do you know? What was the official
I
death
don't
count?
know.
Okay.
It's in the dozens, but it's far more than that
So,
because
so
they were really
NASA knows this.
experimenting.
So NASA knows
They
this. So
know it.
yeah, sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead. So keep going.
No, so NASA knows it. So they don't talk. So the Van Allen radiation belts were discovered in the 50s by a guy called Van Allen, oddly enough, and so NASA would have known about this, but they never discuss it. So in the official documents, press releases, whatever, they never mentioned the Van Allen radiation belts before 69. This only comes out after 69, and you never get through them. They're 30 to 50,000 miles thick. The radiation levels are nobody really knows. NASA has sent probes. It's at least 1,000, 10,000 times what they are on this planet, probably more than that. But what they did find out with some of the Artemis probes they sent out recently, including 2022, was that gamma ray particles and proton particles, which are a form of radiation particles, these go through everything. They go through your clothes, they go through metal, they go through tin, nickel, aluminum, they go through plastic, they go through water. So you've been saturated with protons. Protons are emitted from the sun, part of the plasma emission. So, and they saturate our solar system. So you're not avoiding them. So you know the Apollo 11's a fraud because they don't even mention protons. So they don't mention they never mention things like solar flares, cosmic radiation. Radiation levels are never discussed. The Van Allen belt radiation telemetry was never discussed. It was never offered. So NASA is saying that they went through the Van Allen belts in 10 minutes or something. They found a magic door, they found a portal, and they just zoomed through it in 10 minutes. So it's at 30,000, 50,000 miles in thickness. They surround the Earth. You can't avoid them. It doesn't matter the trajectory, it doesn't matter the angle, it doesn't matter what your story is. And if you think about it, this is one odd factor that the fanboys seem to miss. So NASA claims they went through the Van Allen radiation belts in 10 minutes, which means they're traveling 120,000 miles an hour, which is impossible. There's no fuel, there's no thrust, there's no rockets for that. So the process is the Saturn V takes a capsule. There's actually 3 components to it, and it weighs about 45 tons. They're lifting 45 tons. So I can tell you, and anyone who's done the analysis will tell you, the Saturn V rocket did not have the lift capacity or the thrust to lift 45 tons out of the atmosphere. It simply didn't have it. So you can, a lot of calculations exist. It's too small. Werner von Braun said it had to be 100 times bigger. And he was right. We talked about the Empire State Building volume. That is more than 100 times bigger than Saturn V. Saturn V is picking up 45 tons. There's three components. There's a command module, which is the little cone on top of the main module, which is actually called a service module. The service module is where they keep the fuel cells and maybe some extra water, some water reserves. And then they have attached to it the landing module, the LEM. So the LEM contains, they say, 10 tons of fuel and 5 tons of material, 15 tons. The capsule module, command module, is about 5 tons itself. The service module is around 10, 12 tons, 15 tons even. So it's quite a unit that they're trying to take up with the Saturn V rocket, massive amount of weight. So, and then you add the fuel to that. So there's no possibility that it got into the atmosphere, I don't think. Now, what they're trying to tell us is that the rocket disengages, off they go. They go through the Van Allen radiation belt supposedly in 10 minutes, 120,000 miles an hour. Absolutely no way you can do that. Then they slow down. So why do they slow down? Nobody knows. But it took them 72 hours to get to the moon. So we can pull out our calculators. They're telling me that, okay, 24,000 miles per hour to exit the atmosphere, to exit into space. That's what they're saying. Suddenly they ramp up to 120,000 or something. They rip through the Van Allen radiation in no time. They find the magic door there. But then they slow down. They're really slow. In fact, they stopped, it looks like, because if you take a calculator, 240,000 miles to the moon, roughly 24,000 miles an hour on average, I'm there in 10 hours. So guys, why is it taking 72? Nobody's ever asked this question. Why did it take 72 hours, guys? It's their own documentation. It's 3 days. Why would it take 3 days at 24,000 miles an hour to get to the moon's orbit? So something's not right. And what I say, my Substack, when I go through the comms, I say the reason why it's 3 days is something went upside down. So keep in mind, this is a theater production, right? So if the theory is that they're faking it, which is, I think, obviously what they did, I'm not even talking about the photos, all that, we can talk about that later. But if I just look at the comms, I look at reality, look at the rocket power, I look at what they're trying to lift off and get into space, doesn't make any sense. I look at the Van Allen radiation belt, the zip through there in no time, doesn't make any sense, because that means they have to accelerate and slow down again. Why did it take them a further to the Van Allen radiation belt, 70 hours in total to get to the moon's orbit? No one's ever explained this. So NASA said they took their time because they're being careful. But how do you decelerate? What's a mechanism to decelerate or accelerate in a command module where I'm limited? I'm limited in the amount of fuel I carry, the rocket power, and my batteries. The whole thing runs on batteries. So if you go through the battery power, Andrew, sitting in the service module, they have these fuel cells, but they're extremely, this is 1960s. These things are extremely inefficient. They're supposed to feed, the NASA story is that they fed the command module and the LEM. LEM's attached to the entire structure. They fed them with the battery power, the energy. Now I go through the batteries and everything in my Substack and analyze it. So there's you're not getting to the moon and back with the battery power that they said. They didn't have enough battery power. The fuel cells are not efficient enough to power for 3 days. That's what they say, their own data, 3 days. They didn't have enough fuel cell energy to power the capsule or the lunar module. Now keep this in mind as well. The batteries in the command module and also the lunar module, they are running everything. So they're running the electronics, the systems, the life support systems, the oxygen, everything you need to stay alive, the heat, the water sublimation. So in physics, the only way to get rid of heat is to sublimate it in a closed environment. You use water and you cool it down, you sublimate it, you take it out. You have to have the exhaust sent somewhere. There's no facility for that with these craft. So what they're trying to tell us is that between the Earth and the Moon, they used the fuel cells to power both modules so that when they got to the moon's orbit, they had enough battery power to do what they had to do. That's their story. But if you analyze the fuel cells, they would never make it there. And if you look at the LEM, the batteries in the LEM are insufficient. I talk about that in my Substack, completely insufficient. Even if they're 100%, when they hit the moon's orbit, they still wouldn't do the job they said they're doing. No, impossible. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that to take the lunar module into space and you're putting wattage through a connection, you're heating up the LEM. You still need to run the water sublimator. You still need to reduce the heat. Otherwise, when you get to the moon, you have a craft that's around 200, 400 Fahrenheit in temperature. The controls were fried. So you have to use the water sublimator off the battery inside the LEM. It drains the battery. Before the LEM even arrives at the moon, the batteries on the LEM are dead. It's a dead rock. It's what it is. It's albatross. So no matter which way you look at it, you can talk about fuel cells, you can talk about sharing the power, sharing the energy. Not enough battery power for the 3 days. They told us 3 days. Now, 10 hours, the calculations are different. I think the command module, my own personal opinion, based on reality, goes dark after about 12 to 15 hours. And by going dark, I mean you die. So the Apollo 13 nonsense, where the power goes off, the stupid movie with Hanks, you'd be dead in an hour. You're dead. If the battery powers off or doesn't work, you will die. The whole thing is running off the batteries, and there's zinc silver batteries. And NASA's own documents, Andrew, I've gone through, they say that they're 30% efficient in space. Not 100%. They're 30 of what they are on this planet. Now, go back to reality. You're an astronaut. Your name is St. Neil of the big, strong arms, yeah? They're telling you you're going to the moon. Would you get in that tin can, Andrew? First, give me the battery life expectancy, guy. How does a battery work, guys? How does the fuel work, guys? How do I stay alive between here and the moon, guys, over 3 days? I think I would like to test that out in low Earth orbit a few times, maybe more than once, probably 2 or 3 or 5 times. I want to test this out. How does it all work, guys? No simulations, no testing. First time to use the batteries in space. It outperforms all expectations. The most efficient batteries and fuel in history, Andrew. You get there in 3 days. Now, here's the thing. Collins is in the command module. He's 30 miles above the surface doing the orbit around the moon, yeah? He doesn't have the fuel for that, doesn't have the battery power for that. Armstrong takes the LEM, goes down to the surface on his 10,000-pound thruster engine rocket, which is equivalent of 18,005 horsepower lawnmowers. Okay, and the wigwam, or the homeless shelter, the science fair project that they called the lunar module, 18,005 horsepower engine lawnmowers. So, and he's talking in real time with no noise, no structural vibrations, no modulations, no interference, nothing. It's a fantasy world. So here's a story in the comms. So first of all, the LEM would be out of battery before they even got to the moon. Even if there was 40 or 50% battery life left, you don't have enough battery to do what they're doing, going down, descending, staying on the surface for 2.5 hours and going back up. You don't have enough battery power. They're trying to sell you that Armstrong is wearing a headset inside this science fair project, atop of 18,000 lawnmowers, and he's talking on VHF, very high frequency, to a transponder. So the transponder is sitting next to the 18,000 lawnmowers. So in real life, it's a 30-pound object. It's a 30-pound server equivalent in today's terminology. It would be shaken to bits and destroyed. So there'd be such a structural vibration of noise and energy being transferred in that craft, this basic physics, that they would have died probably. If you did it on this planet, your ears would pop out, your organs would be you'd be dead. If you sat on top of 18,000 horsepower, 18,000 lawnmowers of 5 HP and did it on this planet, you'd be dead, you'd die. So you could say 1/6 gravity, 1/6 either, 1/6 medium on the moon. It's a different story, fair enough. But you're still going to be impacted. You're still going to be sick, probably dead, but you would hear the noise in the communications. The VHF is a headset. It's connected to the transponder over a frequency. It's like a personal area network wireless frequency. That transponder is connected to the top of the lunar module to a satellite. It's a hardwired connection. That satellite sends a signal to a receiving station on Earth. They said in their own documentation that there's 2 main receiving sites, but the primary one's Perth, Australia, which receives the communications, transfers that to a coaxial cable connection sent across the ocean to Houston, and is processed through an IBM mainframe into a data control center, which sits right next to the control room. Now, you're not doing that in 1.3 seconds. There's no power for it. There's no frequency for it. There's no bandwidth for it. There's impossibility of real-time communications using vacuum tube technology, which is what the transponder is premised on, with some transistors. This transponder runs on 20 watts. The 20 watts has to be fed by a battery. We're back to the battery problem again. It's not just the 20 watts. It's that the transponder is connected to other units, other things inside the lunar module and to the satellite is pulling in. It needs more than 20 watts. It needs 150. It doesn't have 150 watt capacity. So the batteries would be drained. The 20 watts is it's a refrigerator light bulb, Andrew. It's not transferring anything. The signal would be so weak that if you send any signal through a satellite into space with 20 watts as a power source, it's so weak that the static of space would just eat it up. And anything receiving it anywhere would know what it was. You're not transferring voice, you're not transferring packets, you're transferring nothing but noise. So the satellite is too small. It's about a third of the size it would need to be. It runs on battery. We're back to battery power again. It would have drained the battery. So they're trying to tell us that Armstrong is descending, VHF headset, 2 transponder satellite, all the way over to Perth, Australia, through this magic data comms network, and it arrives in control room in real time. And they roger that, Neil, you're go, Neil, for PDI. And back it goes, and Neil, roger that, Houston, we're PDI. It is absurd. In fact, some of the communication is less than 2.5 seconds. Now, the speed of light's wrong, but if I just take the speed of light at their word, there's no possibility of this happening. There's too many hops. And the frequency and bandwidth don't allow it in 1960. I don't even allow it today, to be honest with you. You couldn't even do this today. So they cannot argue on the comms. The comms and the batteries destroy their entire narrative in the comms. This transponder is a multiplexer, which didn't exist in 69. So the images we see, the live feeds we see, the audio we hear is all through that little box and the 20-watt bulb. It's absurd what they're trying to sell us. Connected to a satellite that's too small. So there's no way that a multiplexer in 69 could take the rich data, package it up, and send it across a very narrow frequency. And their multiplexing means I'm taking gigahertz frequency to megahertz, there's a kilohertz in the case of this transponder, kilohertz to gigahertz to megahertz back to kilohertz. And the kilohertz is what the guys in the control room see. That's the data. So it's a translation of different frequencies. So what they're doing is they're trying to sell us that this magic box had the capability of having 3 sub-carrier frequencies. That's what they're saying, for voice and for images and for live feeds. You ran over 3 different frequencies. It's impossible, 1969, over a little box powered by nothing. It doesn't work that way. Now imagine it's beside the engine. So how does it work? Wouldn't there be interference from the engine as you're coming down and talking? Of course there would be. It's sealed in a sealed bay, they said, to protect it from radiation. So there's metal, there's aluminum, there's nickel. So how can I, with my headset, talk through that? How does that work? So of course there's interference. There'd be drops, there'd be static, there'd be noise everywhere. You wouldn't be able to hear a thing. But they're talking almost in parallel real time. So side by side, the bandwidth would never allow that. You'd never have the same.
Is this the same horseshit they did with that ridiculous phone call to Nixon?
Oh my God, it's the same communication system.
Yeah.
So I describe it on my Substack, and it's quite complicated, and it's very ingenious. But what they did in '65, they built the Langley Simulation Center. This is where they do all the simulation data. Mm-hmm. So they do all the data, all the stuff that you hear on the TV or in the feeds, whatever it is, that's all done at Langley. And it's put through the IBM mainframe. And what they do is they map it to the actual flight path. It's also done from the mainframe. So the control room, and there's a data center right beside the control room with a glass window. They can look into the control room. These guys in the data center, called the SCA, Simulation Control Area, these guys control the information going into the MCC, the control room, with the guys at the monitors. So the SCA controls everything. It runs off the mainframe. So I can simulate anything. So if Apollo 13, because of the rocket, there was a misfire in the rocket launch, the capsule ends up in the Bay of Biscay, the Soviets pick it up and give it back to the Americans in September of 1970. Thank you very much. So to hide the fact that the launch had failed, and there's nobody, of course, in the capsule's floating, nobody in it, no heat shield, that they come up with the Apollo 13 nonsense. So there's a problem, power, and Tom Hanks gets involved, and the sad story, and amazing victory and innovation, all the rest. So it's all simulated. So NASA and Langley had about 1,000 programs of simulations. They simulated everything. And so you could marry the simulation data with shots of them on the moon, which they took at Cannon Air Force Base in June, July of '68, and probably elsewhere as well. But they shot for a month or 6 weeks there. Apollo 11, at least, maybe other Apollo programs. Those are the lunar shots. And why do they do it at an Air Force base? So you can't shoot outside in the desert because the roadrunner might run by, or it might be a bird flying by or something, or someone on a motorcycle might come by and, hey guys, what are you doing? So you do it inside a controlled area, military complex, secured, and they always have the black curtains. So Langley Simulation Center, I have the old pictures, and I've shown my Substack. Behind the crane, they have these massive black curtains. So it's always black in the background with the Apollo program. So same thing inside the Air Force Base. It's always black curtains. So the desert's nice because it's secured and it's isolated. But you can also go down the desert and you get material that looks like a lunar surface, and you can just populate your set with the local raw material. So you don't need to do much. So it's perfect in many ways. So they did this at Cannon. You take the landing sequences, and you can marry them quite easily to all the telemetry and all the simulation you have, and then you could feed that into the control room, and you can see the reactions of the guys. And there are some people who claim to have photo and videographic evidence of when Armstrong supposedly lands the Eagle, that in the control room nothing's happened. There's a long lag. Now I don't know if it's true or not, but it wouldn't surprise me that there's a lag between the supposed touchdown and the communications. And this is the problem of the 72 hours. I think it took them 72 hours because something went upside down in this very complicated, admittedly very complicated, NASA communication system, closed loop, that they owned and operated with many hops. So here's the thing I haven't told you yet. This is the killer. 67. So the transponder, okay, we talked about Gagarin, right? And skin track. You can't skin track above a certain altitude. So the only way is to send a signal. So the thing in the sky, or the cosmos, that sends a signal down. and you have to scan for it over radio frequency. You scan it. So NASA and the Soviets had technology for this. So what do? You can't radar track, of course. You can't do it today, but you can signal track. So they put up in '67 the TETR satellite, which, what do you think contained? S transponder. They're testing this in '67, Andrew. Low Earth orbit satellite, TETR, S transponder signal coming down, received at the dish in Goldstone, the US, and Perth, Australia. They're testing that in '67. '68 comes. They have the TETR-2 production grade. They learned some stuff from number one, improved it, made it better. Transponder signal from LEO going down to Goldstone, going down to Perth. So if you have a satellite dish, you're just waving around. You're looking for an approved signal frequency. S-band is a frequency. I'm looking for S-band. I got it. I got the S-band signal. Where's it come from? I don't know. It's from out there somewhere. So you don't know where the provenance of it is. So you receive it and you accept it, and then it goes into the network that NASA owned. Now, here's the other thing that's really interesting. So it was never tracked. So when NASA and the fanboys say they tracked Apollo, they are liars. The NASA's own documentation discusses encryption. So this S transponder box had 2 levels of encryption in the process. The first level is, as we mentioned, it's a multiplexer. It's taking data, packets, voice, audio, whatever, the image, and it's putting them into a frequency. And there's 3 sub-frequencies, and they're wrapped and rolled into one frequency and sent by the satellite. So it's encrypted by design. But the satellite to Earth transmission via the low Earth orbit satellite, which no one knows about, that's also encrypted. It's called a PRN code. This is a pseudo-random noise encryption key. No different than what we have today. Anything sent on the internet will be encrypted with an encryption key. This means that you can sniff the packet, you can't look in the packet. And in terms of space, you can sniff the transponder message being sent. You don't know where it comes from. So the Soviets, they ran tracking signals in low Earth orbit, which is all they had the capability to do. They would have picked up something, but where's it from? They don't know. And what's in it? I don't know. I don't have the encryption key. I can't decrypt it. So when they say it's tracked, they're liars. They sent the signal from the low Earth orbit satellite to their dishes encrypted. Everything is encrypted. The Soviets have said that when Armstrong walked around the moon, they were watching the TV like everybody else. They had no idea what was going on. They could not read any of the frequency, any of the signals. They could not break into any of the comms. It's all encrypted. NASA said in their pre-Apollo 11 flight release that the signal would not be tracked because of the Soviets. It was encrypted. It's in their own documentation. The simulations they ran, the end-to-end testing they ran in '68 and '69 before Apollo 11, the astronauts asked on the simulation, what about the PRN? They're talking about the encryption key. Is it PRN enabled? It's in their simulation talk. So they were using encryption. It means you can't track it. You can track something coming down. You don't know where it's from. It could be from the moon, it could be from Mars, it could be from nowhere. It could be real, it could be fake. You don't know what's in it. You don't know if it's from a capsule. You don't know what's in the capsule. But it's from a LEO satellite is the easiest explanation. They launched it in '68. It was operating in '69. In fact, it operated the entire Apollo program. It might even still be there. I don't know. I haven't checked. But that's what they're doing to fake the signal, to give you the impression there's some signal from space. Very clever, very evil, but it doesn't prove that it was tracked. So that is a big lie. And I hate when people say that to me, it was tracked, because that's just stupid. It's not how the communications that were operated.
So
And
you're
this
saying
is a NASA.
the cut you off just because for a normie on the subject like me, so they encrypted it so they could pretend there was a signal, but you couldn't actually read the signal and prove that it wasn't actually a signal. Is that kind of what you're saying?
So it's all theater. Yeah. So
Okay. Yeah, well, I got that. Yeah.
The only way to track an object is to send that object to send back a signal to a receiving location.
Right.
So this is why Gagarin's a fraud, because you can never radar track. You can never skin track that, right? 200 miles up. So what NASA learned from that is the Soviets blasted from a radio transmission tower, blasted a signal. It was picked up. NASA said, no, we have to do better than that. We have to give the impression that we're getting something from space, but also sending it back to space. So they're beaming S transponder frequency radio signals back out to space, but to nowhere. just in case
Okay.
somebody was trying to track it. Now, nobody could track that, but they look good. So it's very clever. The architecture is actually quite clever. But you know what, Andrew, here's the thing. So I calculated, so the communications architecture is the key to the whole thing. So when the astronauts are talking, they're in Langley or they're in Norton Air Force Base, they're on a communication line owned by NASA. It's Bell Telecoms, but it's owned by NASA, built by Bell. It's a direct link to the control room. They're on the phone, okay, doing the communication. That's what they're doing. That's why when Nixon's magic green phone, when Nixon's talking to them, is less than real time because Nixon's in Washington and they're down the road in Langley, not far away. So that's why it sounds like it's in the same room. So that's the easiest explanation. If you were actually 238,000 miles away, you wouldn't be able to talk to anyone with this S transponder. The communications are impossible. Satellite's too small. All the stuff we talked about. If you did get a signal, it would be so faint, so weak, you wouldn't be able to hear anything. You would hear nothing but static.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be dropped. You might get a word maybe or two, but it would just be dropped. It's too weak of a signal. And this is the
I live in a
problem.
mountain. I live in a little mountain town just north of Phoenix, and I mean, I know this is unrelated, but still, I can barely. My phone goes out all the time trying to make a phone call to somebody 5 miles away. You're going to tell me in 1960s, whatever, he's on a hard line talking to people on the moon. It's ridiculous.
With analog technology, it's impossible.
Yeah,
all this stuff is vacuum tube.
It's laughable.
It is laughable. Yeah. So for a lot of people, the Nixon phone call was a wake up. They said, well, it can't be true because there's no way to get a signal that quickly to the moon and back. And that's good. At least some people are awake. But the whole communications architecture is quite ingenious. And it would take 5 years to build. So here's my point on this, just to kind of round it off. You would need about 100 people to do this, Andrew. 100. So when people say to you, well, there's 4 trillion, billion, zillion people who worked on Apollo, no. Yes, they built the satellite, they built the capsule, they built the computer thing, they built whatever, doorknob, glass, whatever. But no, to build the communications, you need IBM, Motorola, Collins Radio, some contractors. They would build the data center, they would build the control room, they would build the mainframe, they would build the coaxial cable connections, they build telecoms out to Langley, etc., all in the closed system, all owned by NASA. But the end-to-end, no more than 100 people, probably even 50 would need to know about it. You need end-to-end architects, end-to-end relay experts, end-to-end communications experts, end-to-end testers. And this is why I go back to the 72 hours, because something went upside down in July of 69. So the 10-hour trip took 72 because the communications, first time they went live, imagine if you own a theater company, right? You have a big play, opening night's next week. You do the pre-opening night live performance to the audience, and everything goes upside down. The props fall down, the actors miss their lines, the makeup's all wrong, the costumes are wrong, the audience is booing. This is what went on with Apollo 11. It went upside down. This was the first live test run, end to end. Now, they did test it. And there's evidence in their own documentation. They tested this in 68 and 69, but not in front of a live audience. It wasn't in front of the global audience. It wasn't in front of people being, maybe a little skeptical. Because 30% of Americans after Apollo 11 did not believe they landed on the moon. 30. That's down to 10. There's the power of propaganda for you. You've been told since kindergarten that Armstrong walked around on the moon. So 30% said, nah, not buying that story. Doesn't seem real to me. And keep in mind how short it was. So they're on the lunar surface for only 2.5 hours. Only 2.5 hours. So how difficult is it to really, all the stuff that we talked about, the communications, mapping things along, that's what Hollywood does. This is what Hollywood is in business for, to create a virtual reality for us, right? And to entertain. Well, this was entertainment at its finest. This is a great cinematic production based on, I think, the best, the most ingenious simulation center ever created. These guys at Langley, they were smart bastards. Evil, but they're smart. They had every angle covered. They thought about everything, but they made so many mistakes, Andrew. That's why it's a small team. End to end, 100 people knew this. I am sure there have been whistleblowers from that team of 100 who knew what's going on. I'm sure that half of them, if they never blew a whistle, would be dead, or they would have been threatened or de-lifed in some way. So I'm sure people have stepped forward, but you never hear about it. But it's a small group. It's not 400,000 people on Apollo, guys. end-to-end communications is the key. That IBM mainframe to the control room, that transponder satellite, which nobody knows about, those are the key things. And very few people need to be involved in that.
Even those few people, those few people, not to cut you off, but even those, they compartmentalize those people as well. I mean, it's not just like,
yes, of course they do.
And anybody looks at the COVID thing and sees that it was a worldwide hoax. I mean, to now not know that they can't pull these scams off and make them work with what you're talking about, 50 to 100 people. I mean, they had thousands of people involved with that scam. Yeah. So it's easy to do.
It's easy to do. So that the argument that there's a lot of people involved is a false one, because they're just doing stuff. Mm-hmm. So if you ever worked on a big project, you know that you have no clue of the end to end. You're just doing whatever it is you're doing. You're programming. Right. You're doing. I'm a tester. I'm a guy doing some architecture. I'm a guy doing this. But very few people see that end to end, and they tested it. That's the thing. In their own documentation, they tested all of this end to end. And in their own documentation, Andrew, they tested the simulation of a live landing more than once. And in those simulations, you hear things like, it's a PRN on. You hear these like little giveaways from the astronauts. And so if you listen to Armstrong or any of the communication from any of the missions on the moon, it sounds like a simulation. It doesn't sound real. Armstrong coming down over 18,000 5 HP lawnmowers doesn't sound real to me. Yeah, 100 feet. Yeah. Well, we landed. Yeah. That was kind of boring. Yeah, pass the shoes. Go for a walk. So nothing about radiation. Nothing about. There's no shaking. There's no violence. There's no energy. It's simulation. That's exactly what it sounds like. And that's why when they have the press conference, the three of them look like they've been hit by a truck.
That's right. Yeah.
The lie was so massive. The seat is so massive that even those guys who were Armstrong died with 15 million US estate. They were paid to be actors. Even then, I think the weight of what they did almost crushed them.
Do you think they found out about it pretty close before that conference? You think they kind of just found out about it because they were it looked like they just like seen a ghost? You know what I mean? There's a press conference that if anybody knows where they're after they supposedly went to the moon. And you go climb a mountain, you see a guy who climbs a mountain, he's screaming and yelling. It's like this life affirming, amazing thing. These guys supposedly just went to the freaking moon and they look like they just saw their mother die in front of them. Like it's unbelievable. Do you think they just found out about it, or what made them get so down then, do you think?
I think they knew about it in 68. So I think up to 68, these nothing, you can't take away from their credentials. So they're all American boys. They're all handsome. They're all smart, physically imposing, technically gifted, great pilots. And I think they really believed, Andrew, up to 68, up to Grissom was murdered probably, 67, but just after that probably, they found out that it's going to be a Capricorn 1. I think it weighed on them. And if you look at the landing, so this is the other thing. So I haven't talked about the mechanics of landing or taking up, to go through the atmosphere from space, 24,000 miles an hour in a tin can with a little heat shield is physically impossible. It's mechanically impossible. There's no brakes. They talk about computer systems, but they were not computer systems. These were hardwired analog circuits. The memory was literally wires wrapped around magnetics. And that's what the memory was. That your cell phone has 100,000 times more power and gigahertz capacity than what they had managing the capsule, the command module. So you don't fly through, depends on how you want to count them, 6 or 7 layers of the Earth's atmosphere, 24,000 miles an hour, first time ever, again. Heat shield first, which is too thin. Never tested, of course, the heat shield, at least with any veracity. You can't find any real test data on the heat shields. So heat shield first, and you have to, again, micromanage the angles. You're using retro rockets. You're doing a bunch of piloting stuff that's very complicated. And then, of course, you land right in the landing zone. And so if you look at a map of the planet, you're landing right in your landing zone. Never before tried, never before attempted, right there. So it just doesn't make any sense. They would have died on the way down. So, but when they land, can you imagine being if you actually did it, you're being irradiated. You have protons, gamma rays. There's solar and cosmic events every day, 3 to 35, depending on the year, the month, the day. So you would have been exposed to all this. You would have been radiated, been sick. You're in a payload of a car, basically. You're dirty, unhygienic. You're eating globs, paste globs. You're sick. You haven't slept, and they land near Hawaii, of course, exactly where they should land, and they're happy, thumbs up, and they're grinning. It defies any sort of belief. That alone's a fraud. And if you did go through all the mechanics and communications, all the other stuff, just looking at that, you say that's impossible, guys. You should be dead or half dead. You should be lying there saying, "Thank God I'm home. Get the hell out of here." You wouldn't be doing thumbs up. You'd be doing thumbs down. Like, what the hell did I just do? I almost died.
It'd be like surviving Normandy, like coming back from like surviving.
PTSD or whatever it's called. You're shell shocked. You're Apollo shocked. So there's no reality to this. And they're quarantined for a few days. But Aldrin becomes a drunk after. He goes into an institution. He becomes mentally unfit for a while, for about 2 or 3 years. He becomes a drunk after that. Armstrong disappears. And at the press conference, they're asked a very simple question: did you see stars? Well, Armstrong's reading from a teleprompter. He goes, I don't recall. I think I was shooting the corona, the solar corona, with my Hasselblad camera, which would have melted the camera. There's no shots whatsoever of the solar corona. I don't think we saw stars. We see stars. Collins says, no, I don't recall seeing stars. Collins writes 5 years later in his autobiography, he saw billions of them. So the story changes in 5 years. They can't even get their story straight and keep it straight. So there's something seriously wrong with the entire imagery they present at the press conference. Like you said, if someone asked me, if you went to the moon and said, "Did you see stars?" I could give you almost a minute by minute account of when I started to see stars or not. How many did I see in the lunar surface? I saw the Earth from the lunar surface. I can tell you exactly what it looked like. You could give every detail, right? You'd be running for governor of Ohio if you're Armstrong. You'd be running for president. You'd be running NASA. They disappear. So none of it's real.
Yeah. So the landing, the LEM, is that tinfoil that I've heard it's the funniest
thing. That's the Science Fair project, from grade 8 or so.
I've heard it's described as a meth head's treehouse.
That might be a good description of it.
Yeah,
it's something you put your fist through.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, it's totally unstable. And the story is that this capsule weighed 15 tons on planet Earth. 5 tons of material and 10 tons of fuel. But if you look at the capsule, I'm wondering to myself, so where the hell did you put the fuel? Where's the fuel, guys? There's no space for fuel in there. Then you have the 18,000 lawnmowers, and these two guys, Armstrong and Aldrin, are standing up as they're descending. And as they ascended as well, they had to stand up right on top of the lawnmowers. But right beside the lawnmowers is the bay for the transponder, which is the communication. So when they're wandering around on the moon with a waving flag and the shadows everywhere, they're talking off the headset underneath the helmet to this transponder. That's what they're doing, which is then linking up to the satellite, which is then beaming it back to a fixed point on the planet. Well, that's all nice. Impossible in real life. Okay, it would never work. But here's the thing. So I tried to find out where did they land. So where exactly did they go? So you think that's simple, right? There's at least 10 different locations. So the original Tranquility Bay, or the Sea of Tranquility, or Tranquility Base, so many names for it, was supposed to be this lava plateau on the moon, very flat, and that's where Armstrong supposedly landed. Well, you find out now that's not where he landed. He did not land in the Sea of Tranquility at all. He landed many miles away, because the Sea of Tranquility is jagged basaltic rock. You can't land the Science Fair project there. It would be destroyed. So he landed supposedly 4 or 5 miles away now. And every few years, NASA changes the location. There's actually a guy who has spent a lot of time mapping out all the different locations for Apollo 11 and all the other Apollo missions, and they're always changing. So this is laughable. You went to the moon, but you can't tell us where you landed. But you're beaming live feeds off the transponder. Well, wouldn't we know what the location was then? Because you're beaming the telemetry. It's absurd, isn't it?
We do interviews when we have wireless mics. If there's literally like power line or power grid, what do they call it? Just towers. If you're next to like a tower,
grid, pylons.
They don't work. You can't even get a signal.
Exactly. They don't work.
Yeah, like these wireless mics from the moon. It's just
they're walking around, location unknown. And they're walking around. The transponder is supposed to be good for 250 feet. They say the transponder VHF signal. Well, you can get a hold. I've actually looked at a transponder, held a replica, connected it to VHF. It doesn't work over more than just a few dozen feet, maybe. So in 250 Fahrenheit heat, right, the light side of the moon, being irradiated by protons, wearing these silly spacesuits, which were never tested for proton radiation. Underneath the helmets, they have the headset, and they're wandering around talking to something over yonder in the LEM in a sealed bay. It defies belief. I have to my signal has to go across wherever it is I'm walking through metal into the transponder and then be hooked up into the satellite. That's a communications method. And it's never tested. So if you ask NASA, well, show me this on Earth, they can't give you anything. They say something about a control room, magic words, control room, whatever that is. And we did some testing they had a couple of flights. So they had pre-Apollo 11 flights. They had one mission where they supposedly had the LEM connected to the command module, went up into low Earth orbit, and they did the disconnection reconnection routine. And they said they tested the communications and disconnecting and reconnecting there, but there's no proof of that. There's no real test data or simulation data, but it's totally different than going 238,000 miles and then disconnecting and coming down to a surface, and then you're in 250 Fahrenheit heat. So the satellite would have melted. It would have just melted in the heat. The silly cameras they carried, the Hasselblads, were painted silver against the radiation and the heat. They would have melted. The emulsion film, which is carbon-based, would have melted. The Hasselblad cameras are slightly customized, but they're basically off the shelf, slightly customized. There's no proof. NASA says again, control room, no proof they're tested in 250 Fahrenheit against gamma or proton radiation that you have on the moon. No proof whatsoever. They can't provide any. So we're supposed to believe that on my chest, I'm Armstrong, camera on my chest, I'm pointing at this drunk St. Buzz the Bottle. He's doing he's saluting the American flag, which is waving because there's a fan underneath the module simulator. And in the background, you have the Earth. That's a famous picture of Apollo 11. So the Earth is the wrong size. So again, they mixed up their models. This is why it's a small team, Andrew. It's not a big team doing this. They made too many mistakes. The flag waving was a mistake. So the missions after that, you never see a flag wave again. They caught that one and they corrected it. So you never see the flag wave again. But in other missions, you see weird things. So they talk about there's no such thing as a vacuum, but that's their story. So in a vacuum, if I'm walking on the moon and I'm doing the bunny hops that they supposedly did, which are just harnesses in the back and wires at Langley, Virginia again, they kicked up the dirt from the Earth. So in a supposed vacuum, it's a parabolic curve. So if I pull up dirt from my boots and I'm jumping, the dirt will just go up and goes down immediately in a curve, right? There's nothing to stop it. So according to their own dogma, there's no particles or there's no molecules to stop the sand or the dirt from just going up and straight down again. Let's go straight down again. If you look at the videos and the photos, there are dust clouds. The dirt's being kicked up and it's fluffy and it's emanating and it's being emitted in different directions. So either it's fake, which it is, it's shot in Air Force Base somewhere, or it's not a vacuum. But if you say it's not a vacuum, then all their other excuses go away, because if you pick out something that did wrong, the photos, for instance, the shadows or the processing of the images or whatever, the lack of sound vibration landing, the no flame, vacuum. That's the magic word they use. If I pull the vacuum out, I say, okay, well, why isn't the sand just doing the parabola? There's no vacuum there, right, guys? So I see fluffy, I see emissions. Yeah, there's no vacuum. Suddenly all the other excuses are gone. So now they're in trouble. They have to maintain the vacuum excuse. It's absolutely mandatory that they keep saying vacuum. But you can look at the images yourself. The sand particles and dust do not behave as if it's in a vacuum. So something's wrong with that as well. Now, I don't know if have you interviewed Bart Sabriel?
No, but I know you're talking about.
Yeah, Bart Sabriel. So you got Sabriel.com. He's actually an interesting chap. He comes out of the photography and filmmaking domain. He wrote a book. I've read all his books and I've seen his stuff, his films. He was actually kidnapped by the CIA, I think 10, 12 years ago, almost killed. They drugged him, they threatened him and all this stuff. The CIA, quite violent people, of course. So they sent him a warning. And since then, he's been fairly quiet, I have to say. But on his website, Sabriel.com, he has a great video of the Earth in a window trick. And it's phenomenal. It was given to him by a NASA whistleblower. So what they did was, on the supposed journey to the moon at 130,000 miles or halfway roughly, they wanted a shot of the Earth from the command module. So they had this elaborate setup in low Earth orbit. It's not real, where they put a black paper around the window. So open the window up, and this is all live. So this is the simulation video given to Bart Sabril by a whistleblower. Okay, Bart didn't ask for this. He was asking for something else, but he was given this video. It's really, really interesting. So up goes the porthole window shade. In comes the light. So they're in low Earth orbit. They put black paper around with a little spherical cutout in the middle, and they play around with it to get the Earth to the size you think it is from 130,000 miles away. They black out the capsule. The camera's at the back, and you can hear people on the communications, CIA probably, or someone telling them what to do. Do this, do that. Okay, now run it. And that they presented this, and then it goes quiet. And then the camera moves, and you see the Earth in the window trick. The Earth 130,000 miles away, and then Armstrong does the voiceover describing what's happening. They showed that the last part of the process to the world as proof of their journey to the moon. It was all a simulation trick. So that is something that people should see. Now, NASA's comeback is that, of course, so simulation, training, we're just trying to get them used to the size of the Earth as they journey away, some other word salads and whatever they come up with. So this is what they presented that to the world, as that we're on the journey to the moon. Here's some proof. So that's been caught in. So if nothing else, if they lied about that, what else did they lie about? They lied about everything. So you don't need to have. So I think the bottom line here with the Apollo is people should not have an emotional attachment, because you have to recognize that NASA is the CIA and the CIA is NASA. They're the same organization, and they're after the same thing. NASA would like to, CIA, the U.S. military, would like to militarize space, like to militarize the atmosphere, the moon, whatever, to control, right? They'd said that since the 1950s, that they want to weaponize space. They want to control the climate as well. Geoengineering is part of the HARPA and DARP and all the rest of it. HARP and DARPA and those other programs, geoengineering, are about controlling weather.
I mean, they already admitted that. I used to get busted my ass because I see the spraying. I'm in Arizona. They're spraying. It's insane. Yeah. And I used to tell my, scientist friends, like, they're spraying, you're crazy. And they've admitted this now. It's like, it's not even a game where they admit they're spraying the skies. So it's just like another one. Another one in the... Yeah, exactly. How dare they?
So I have an email.
That one really pisses me off, man, because it really messes up the atmosphere out here. Those people need to be executed that are running around those planes. I mean, it really pisses me off.
But now they're smart. They're putting those chemical contaminants into the jet fuel. So that's the other thing I'll talk about the Apollo is the fuel stuff. The fuel is quite interesting. So bottom line is, if you look at the landing, there's no flame. Look at the ascension of the there's no flame. There has to be an emission of something. Because it's hypergolic fuel, fair enough. It's nitrogen plus tetraoxide, fair enough. Fairly clean burning, but against the surface, you will see clouds, no matter what, no matter where. You'll also dig a hole. You'll have a crater. You'll have the structure shaking because of the rocket power, the massive energy going through the science fair project. And you'll have a movement. You'll actually see the craft moving around as it tries to either land or take off. So you would see something. The fact you see nothing goes back to Langley, that huge gantry crane, just moving it up and down, moving it around, giving you the impression, and they're always 30 or 40 seconds, those shots. So the module comes up, 30, 40 seconds, and then it cuts, it blacks out. Because that's what the gantry crane, that's probably, you can only pull up 15 tons or something, whatever the weight limit is. There's a weight limit to how far it could pull up and how high. So that's what they're doing. That's the easiest and simplest explanation for that. So that's a lot of people, sharp-eyed critics, have looked at that and said that tells me it's a fraud. There has to be something going on with that energy. It can't just disappear. It's like physics. It has to go somewhere. It has to be visible, even with hypergolic fuel. Now, Artemis has a problem with hydrogen.
Okay, so for people that don't know, Artemis is the one they're supposed to be launching the moon now. And it was supposed to go February. They keep pushing the date back. So now they pushed it back. It's supposed to go February 6th. Now it's supposed to go March 6th. What's the deal there? And also after that, will you comment on that absurdly hilarious Indian moon landing that happened like last year? I don't know if you saw that. Did you see that?
That's a joke.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you think about Artemis, guys? So what's going to happen there?
Artemis is very interesting. I have not done too many deep dives into it. I've looked at it, and I have my Substack and do a comparison. So I compare Artemis technology with Apollo. I compare the rocketry with Apollo, and the Orion command module with Apollo. So I don't think there's a huge technological leap in the last 50 years, not for the trillion and a half of money that's been spent. So if you look at the fuel and the capacity of the rockets of Artemis versus Apollo, they're not that much different, Andrew. If you look at the efficiency of the rockets, there might be, I think Artemis is probably more efficient based on the technology today, based on the type of fuel as well. The fuels are different. So Artemis is based on hydrogen fuel. So what NASA has found out is that deep space travel, or sublunary travel, if you want to call it going to the moon, deep space, or sublunary, requires hydrogen. Well, Apollo didn't have hydrogen, guys. It had kerosene and oxygen. The Saturn rocket did. So it's called Kerolux. So it didn't have it. So what they're saying is that we need hydrogen power and hypergolic, different types of hypergolic fuels to get into space and stay in space. And they burn more efficiently. The engines will be more efficient. Who knows? It could be right. So they've changed the fuels. The rocketry is somewhat similar in size, power, etc. The command modules still have the same problem, Andrew. They're not thick enough. So to go through radiation, Van Allen radiation belts, to survive in space against what happens every single day, solar flares, cosmic flares, gamma rays, proton emissions, every single day. These things will go through any material. You need lead that is still too thin. So what they've said in their, I talk about this in my Substack, they say things like, how spacesuits are different, they're thicker, more layers, but they're going to pile up water in the capsule for protection. And they've trained astronauts to hide under the seats and stuff like this. It's otherworldly, really. Why would you as an astronaut get into a capsule where you're not 1,000,000% sure that can fend off the radiation? Now, this is the other thing with the Apollo program. So I talk about Substack why Artemis disproves Apollo. It disproves Apollo in many ways. It disproves it in terms of fuel, in terms of trajectory. So Artemis is going around the moon, 80 miles from the surface, doing the slingshot, the famous slingshot. So Collins in 69 is in the command module, 9 miles or 30 miles off the surface, doing the orbit inside the moon's gravity. So they could not have done the slingshot. They never had the fuel or the rocketry or the potential power to get out of the orbit and do the magic slingshot back. So you know that it didn't happen. Artemis is going 80 miles away to avoid what they say is the moon's gravity and pull and do the slingshot. So Artemis has disproven Apollo 11. So in many ways, I talk about in my Substack why I could do comparisons, but they still have major problems. So I think there's maybe, if it's actually real, the chance of success is around 10%. So once you get down to a statistical deviation or a percent total of 5, it becomes statistically insignificant. You're probably going to die. So 10% is just above death or certainly a failure. Even if I play with the numbers, you might get up to 30. But again, as always with these guys, you know, Andrew, when they launch it, if they ever do, it's going to be a success. It's going to be the best ever. New rockets, new technology, new this, new that. First time with human occupation, man flight. It's going to work with the DEI program, with whatever they have in there that they've selected. So Artemis has a lot of problems. And one of the main problems, and one of the most interesting things, goes back again to weight, batteries, back to batteries, and length of time. And they're not even taking a landing module. What they've done, so the landing module is, for Apollo 11, was 15 or so tons, right? They're not even taking that. They still have battery, fuel, and rocket problems. But they are taking what's called an ESM, which is a service module, which imitates a little bit of what Apollo 11 had, that big service module with the command module stuck on top. That service module is doing real-time feeds through a hard connection into the Orion capsule, the command module, of water, so rehydration, but also fuel. But the battery power, the wattage that it's going to consume for 4 people now, not 3. So I have more life support systems, I have more energy, I have more backpacks, I have more everything to worry about. I need more battery power. And these batteries in Apollo 11 were heavy zinc and silver batteries, very heavy, and they didn't have enough of them. So they had, for the lunar module for Apollo 11, they had 6. They needed 20. Is what you calculate if they actually did what they said they did. They would need 20. The weight of that would have destroyed the science fair project. It would have tilted over to the side and not gone anywhere. So they didn't go anywhere because the batteries were insufficient, and the weight of the batteries, the 6 that they had weighed over 500 pounds or something. So if adding another 14, forget it. It's just too heavy. So Artemis has the same type of issues with battery, with power, with wattage, with consumption, with water sublimation, with heating. All those things are still there. The thing they have in their favor is the digital technology, probably the ability to send some sort of signal back, unlike the S transponder. S transponder, by the way, is not being used by Apollo. They're using a completely different currency called Ka, which is a digital-based frequency, Ka frequency, digital, and the S transponder would only be used in emergency backups. So they're telling you that the S transponder doesn't really work. So it's interesting, isn't it? So Orion says we're only using S transponder for limited range and only for emergencies. Yet apparently it was good enough to power Apollo 11 and do all the multiplexing, all the rich data transfer, et cetera, in real time, of course, two-way real-time communications. So there are some advantages with Artemis because technology's moved on. But they still have some fundamental issues with fuel, power, with weight, with doing the slingshot. So if I believe that all the Apollo missions were a fraud. So in my view, the slingshot's never been done. Again, this will be the first time it's attempted. And you know the story, Andrew. First time it's attempted, it always works, doesn't it? So yeah. I'm interested in knowing more about the slingshot. They say in their own documents, you have to sling it through a very narrow corridor at exactly the right altitude from the moon's surface. It's I don't know how to describe it. It's like rolling a ball in a roulette wheel or something. It has to be just it's that narrow corridor. They've never done it. I don't think. I believe all of it's a fraud. So if you've never done it, why, as an astronaut or astronaut, are you going to present yourself as a guinea pig? So I don't know what they're up to, but they've delayed this for 10 years, really. They've been talking about this since 2015. They talked about having a moon bus since the 1980s for tourists. Elon Musk said in 2017 that in 2018, SpaceX or NASA would be providing moon tourism on the moon bus. Well, here we are, getting on 9 years later. We're still waiting for it. So they talk a lot, but they don't. So
really they're gonna have like these. They're gonna have this great script lines too, like one small step for man. They can plan your lines, but yeah, they're gonna have something. I almost forgot something, and there's 2 more questions I want to ask you, and I'll let you go. I really appreciate you taking the time and giving me this much information. It's been amazing. Do you think there's a possibility that they're on the moon now, just obviously not the way that they showed us?
So you mean that we've landed on the moon, but
there's some hidden the alien technology kind of thing? Dark side of the moon.
No, I don't think any of that stuff. So
no? Okay.
Do you believe in that? Is that something you find interesting?
Do I believe in it? No, I have no idea. I just heard, I read, you take it with a grain of salt, but Behold the Pale Horse. I
haven't read that, sir.
It's what was the guy's name? They killed him, of course. He used to do ham radio. He was in the Naval Intelligence. It's on YouTube, but anyways, he claimed that they were on the moon. And then you have the guys that do the astral projection. They claim that one of the guys that was a pretty serious astral projector said that he went to the other dark side of the moon, and there was like these aliens there, and they had humans and all this crazy shit. Human slaves working at these factories. These mines. I don't know. I'm open-minded to anything, just because everything is such a lie. So I'm always open to listen. I don't think so, but I just wonder what your take was if you had any on that.
Well, the dark side of the moon, the temperature would be minus 250 Fahrenheit. So a creature wouldn't survive there. So that's the other thing about space travel that they don't talk about. So they had 4 astronauts from the ISS recently get sick. So they're inside our atmosphere. They're 250 miles up inside our magnetosphere. So they are protected. Yeah, they got sick from what? Radiation and hygiene. Imagine living in a metal tube for 7 months and a shared toilet with 7 people. And the way to urinate or defecate is through a suction hose. You're eating paste clobs, you're in a dark environment, you don't sleep much. and you're being bombarded by radiation. So yeah, I can imagine that they got sick if that's really where they are. Now take that to space. One objection, which is never mentioned, is that your organs would explode. Your spleen, your stomach, your heart, they're not built for space. They're built for this planet in 1G environment. If you go to another environment for any length of time, you're going to die. So when Musk says he's going to Mars, and with 1 million Earthlings between 2030 and 2050 on his magic starship, he's going to change the Martian planet into an Earth-friendly biosphere, he's a raving idiot. He's a lunatic. You can't change the biosphere to start with. But you wouldn't survive there for any length of time to even begin doing it. Your organs would explode. Getting there over, now the standard model is wrong, but let's say it's 40 million miles, according to the standard model, you would die before you even got there. So this is the problem. So on the dark side of the moon is minus 250. Organisms, whatever they are, unless they're deep sea creatures somehow have acclimated themselves to cold temperatures outside the sea, they're not going to survive there. So you'd be dead. And this is the problem with the light side of the moon. These guys are jumping around 250 Fahrenheit as if it's nothing. And you see videos of them tripping on the wires because at Langley, Virginia, they had wires and harnesses, and the actors got mixed up and they fall down. And it's quite funny watching it. They maintain they're on the moon. But if they're really on the moon at 250 Fahrenheit, you would not be walking around swinging a golf club like Alan Shepard. Alan Shepard played golf. You would not be playing golf on the moon. You'd be terrified of dying, and you'd be hiding in the LEM. You'd be looking for shelter. So these guys are running around in Jeeps. How do they get the Jeeps up there? How do they get the golf clubs up there?
Yeah.
The Jeeps weigh 500 pounds. It's silly. So no, I don't believe any of it. I don't believe in aliens to start with because the complexity of life forms is so extraordinarily special that it just doesn't happen by chance, in my opinion. So no, I don't believe in the dark side stuff. But I don't know. I've never been there, so who knows?
Who knows? But like, it's fun to think about. So you said you're a Catholic. Now, I want this to be the
Yes.
final question because I think this is important, especially with the Epstein stuff. I already knew about all that stuff before even that came out. And you talked about how evil these people are. So I made a film called Jones Plantation. I don't know if you've ever aware of that. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I've watched it.
Oh, did you? We are in the world controlled by demonic, evil. Like the world is beautiful. Obviously, God created the world, but the control system, we are living in basically a gigantic prison now, controlled by some of the most evil people that walk among us. Right? What is your take on all this? Let's get crazy.
Definitely evil in the world. Definitely evil in the world. So
evil running the world, not just evil in the world. Like the systems are run by the most.
I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I mean, it's just a demonic energy, and I can actually feel it. Like I almost bite into it. It's real to me. And the Corona pandemic, medical Nazism, which is what it was. I was impressed by it. I could just feel it. I could feel it everywhere. This evil energy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, different than you and I, Andrew, didn't comprehend it, didn't feel it, didn't understand it, didn't intuit it. We did. We could see it, and we knew what it was. I knew that Satan, for lack of a better word, or forces of evil, were at work, and they have been for quite some time. And one of the objectives of the Illuminati, the Freemasons, the atheists, the one world globalists, is to eradicate people like yourself and myself with any belief whatsoever in God or Creator or Christ or whatever the faith system is, to worship basically transhuman technology in some ways, and to worship the state, and to be as you said, maybe a slave in the dark side of the moon or somewhere else. This is what is really going on, and they're prepping. They're always prepping for it. And technology, the scary thing about AI and technology in general, is they now have a pretty deep reach, pretty wide and broad and deep to do this. And so all the stuff that they produce is quite scary. How they can control narratives, the media, internet sites. People always refer. It's circular logic. It's like scientism. So they always refer back to their own sources. Well, they created the source in the first place, so referring back to it doesn't really convince us. We have to refer to an objective proof, and they never do that. So they can't give any independent verification. So when AI says, Grok says, I had some idiot in my Substack say, well, Grok debunked you. It's like saying the BBC debunked me. So, like,
Yeah.
what's the difference, guy?
Right.
So, argue on the merits. Do you understand networking bandwidth, the 1969 technology, or not? I don't care if Grok doesn't. Do you understand it? Because you can't do what they said they did with that tech. It's as simple as that. So, I don't need Grok to tell me anything. So, this is what they do, though. They'll use AI now as a single source of truth. You'll be fact checked by Grok, so this is a control system that I think they have every chance of implementing. And most people, as you know, are sheeple. They will happily follow. They will happily follow. I was waiting for them to announce dog manure during the Rona. That dog manure would cure the next scariant, whatever the scariant was. And if you ate dog manure, you were protected. It was safe and effective. I was waiting for that. I was waiting for the humiliation. The anus swabbing, I thought was genius.
Oh, that's
I
what
thought
I
that
was
genius.
I was just about to bring that up. They came out with that anal swabbing stuff to really stick the screws in the idiots. You know what I mean? Just like,
oh my
their asses
God.
off.
And the dancing nurses in the videos in empty hospitals. I mean, they'd laugh at you. I was waiting for the dog manure, and I would have looked out my window, and my entire street would have been on the knees in the front yard, scooping that up and screaming, "Give me more! I want more! Not enough here!" That's what would have happened. And they would have looked at me and said, hey, stupid, how come you're not following the science? I don't know, guys, it looks a little bit unhealthy. But the only difference between the dog manure and the quaxines is probably the dog manure is healthier. It might have been better for them because everyone around me's got cancer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or some other problem.
Again, it goes back to the Maverick and the machine thing. Why are we like this? I don't have a big enough sample size to draw a conclusion, but at this point, some people grew up in a good house. Some people grew up in a, bad household with bad parents. Some people grow up rich. Some people grow up poor, but there's just a certain type of person that just sees through the bullshit. And most people don't. And I found that during that Corona thing, integrity, it was probably one of the most valuable assets that very few humans have, and
absolutely.
What is that? Is there anything, what are your thoughts? Just a genetic thing? Like, what is it?
It goes back to critical thinking. So there's some studies done, some books I've read that say 10 to 20% of the population are critical thinkers.
Okay.
And within the so it's a very small population to start with, Andrew. Mm-hmm. And why are you a critical thinker? I don't know. Many reasons, like you said, your upbringing. So I was from a single mother household. I was very independent from an early age. I did my own stuff. I was working at age 15. I played sports. I did all the stuff, but I was self-taught. And so I rely on myself, but also others. You don't do everything in life yourself. So your family will help you, your friends will help you. So, you do get help in life, but you almost attract the help, if you know what I mean. Like you go looking for it because you're out there doing stuff yourself. I think that type of personality, the doer. So during the Rona, it was very interesting. I did my own informal surveys of people. So all the PhDs, all the highly educated people, 100% bought in. All the guys I worked with on projects, 100% bought in. And they're all making money. They're all smart, self-proclaimed geniuses, all the stuff, all bought in. The carpenter, the guy running the car wash, the delivery guy, the guy fixing cars. None of them believed it. I talked to people in trades. They all knew it was bullshit.
Right.
Okay. They didn't believe a thing of it. So people who do things, so the laptop warriors will believe anything. The guys who do things in life and get on with things, they are actually critical thinkers. They might not have the degrees. They maybe can't express themselves nicely, long sentences with big words, but they are skeptical people because they get things done. The farmer is a classic. In my life, I always say to people, what's the farmer's view? What do you mean by that? What's a muddy boots on the ground view of reality? Does this make any sense from a farmer standpoint? It brings everything back down to earth because the farmers are smart. They have to live in the real world, not abstract maths and models and flying viruses and that junk. They have no time for it. They're too busy. Busy people creating and building. They are the critical thinkers, are 10 to 20% of the population. The rest are the sheep. No matter how well educated they are. I know people with up-teen degrees making huge money. They told me, many of them told me that they would take as many quaxines as they could possibly get.
Yeah.
I said, for what? Do you even know what's in them? No, I don't care. The government said it's safe and effective. I got to protect Granny and my family, show my children a good example. it's just mind-boggling. But if you talk to them, they'll tell you that they're the smartest people ever. They're the science, they're the
yeah.
reason. They're rational. Nothing
The
rational
more
about it.
degrees and credentials they have, the more they're going to be tied into that. They've committed to this thing. So
They created that paradigm.
Right. And it's again, it's ego. It's like I have a
That's how they
master's
define
degree.
themselves.
I'm embarrassed of my master's degree. I mean, I was a different person when I got that. Like I didn't need that thing. You know what I mean? I'm way too educated. I'm embarrassed of the amount of education I have.
Well, you can be self-educated. It's better.
Yeah, that's right.
The George Stevenson model.
Well, even with the
there's a guy
education,
called
most of the stuff that I know, I've taught myself. I mean, although I didn't learn anything in college. Yeah.
My dad's the same way. He never went to university. He taught himself.
Yeah.
And he was very successful. It was all self-learning. He got busy. He was active. He's in the real world. He didn't have time for theories and crap and nonsense, and was very skeptical. So it's a Ronald Reagan idea. You trust a little bit, but you have to verify everything. And then once you find out they've lied, so how many times does NASA have to lie before people say, I'm not going to believe anything you say because this is lie number whatever 114. So liars lie, and you're still talking and you're still lying.
Well, there's still people that believe that the corona thing was real and that the vaccines helped us, and they're walking around everywhere. It's and they look like you and me. They talk like you and me, but then if the subject comes up, there's like a shift. It's like, oh, I'm talking to an NPC. I do believe NPCs actually exist in the game of life, and they're people that can't change their minds when presented with new information.
Oh yeah,
they're programmed.
Oh, that's the thing. The critical thinkers can change their minds.
That's
so
right.
If you present a critical thinker with like vaccines are always been junk science since the day of that idiot Edward Jenner, who created the drug industry and to make money. It was a stated objective against the smallpox, which has nothing to do with the virus. So it's always been a fraud. And so if you present people information on health, why did diseases decline in the late 19th century and early 20th? It's hygiene, it's sanitation. It's getting rid of horse manure from the streets, you idiots. It's having vehicles like cars in place of horse manure. People don't even understand the basics that horse manure was dropped in tons in city streets. It spread typhus and typhoid and who knows what else, bacteria of all sorts. That would make you sick. It's in your street. It's into your water. The wells were polluted. So you clean all this up, what happens? All these diseases disappear. Nothing to do with quaxines. But if you tell somebody this, who's a critical thinker, they'll say, oh, it's great. And they're interested and they'll change their minds. You talk to the zombies, they just completely reject it. They won't even look at the evidence. And oh, we've been quacked up since the 1960s. And without that, I would have died of, measles or mumps or something. The death rate from measles or mumps is 0. You don't need the quaxines for that. The Amish have proven that.
They'll not just reject your information. They're not just reject your information. They get angry at you because the program.
They get violent. They become violent. Become the mob. They think you're anti-science. You're anti-this. You're anti-that. You're stupid. They call you stupid.
They're anti their religion. Yeah, especially if they're. We can get into atheism. I just think atheists are the dumbest people on planet Earth, but that's probably another conversation for another day. Hey man, so where can people find you before we get out of here? You've given me a lot of your time. I don't want to be too much of a hog of your time.
No, that's good. No, it's Substack. So you can find my writings on Substack. So it's unstabinated, UNSTABBINATED, unstabinated.com, which tells you I didn't take the unholy elixirs during the pandemic. Unstabinated.com. So a lot of writings there. You can just do searches. The Apollo program is part of Scientism because it confers on government the moniker of we are the science of space. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? So you can't criticize NASA, then you're criticizing the government, you're criticizing the science. This is what goes on. So the government's taking over all these domains through organizations like NASA or the WHO or whatever, CDC, global warming has been taken over by governments and agencies, environmental departments, and so on. And it's always comes back to control and power. That's what's going on.
Right on.
Nothing to do with science.
Well, hey, man, thank God for you, and thanks for coming on the show. I look forward to having you on again sometime. Okay, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the show. You can follow me on Twitter if you want at Tregsman with 2 G's and an S, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Drew Media TV. We also have a Rumble channel, Drew Media, if you prefer there. I know a lot of people don't like YouTube Also, if you're listening to the podcast, like on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever, if it's not too much of a pain and you like the show, give it 5 stars so we can get some help from the algorithm. Otherwise, all the other links to our social media will be in the show notes, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.